Hey everyone, welcome back. I always get excited to dive into these deep dives, but this one is extra special. Neuroscience. I mean, who isn't fascinated by the brain? And the source material you sent, wow, it's packed with some truly mind-blowing stuff.
It's really incredible how much we're learning about the brain these days.
It's like we're finally starting to unlock the secrets of our own minds.
And it's not just about the brain itself. Neuroscience actually encompasses the entire nervous system.
Oh, right, the whole network. So we're talking brain, spinal cord, all the nerves that branch out throughout the body.
Exactly. It's this intricate web that controls everything we do, from breathing and moving to thinking and feeling.
Wow, so it's like the nervous system is the ultimate command center for our entire being.
You could say that. And at the heart of it all, of course, is the brain. This incredible organ with billions of neurons, those tiny brain cells, all communicating with each other through electrical and chemical signals.
Okay, so the brain is like Grand Central Station with all these signals constantly zipping around.
That's a great analogy. And it's these signals that create circuits, these pathways of communication that control everything from our reflexes to our most complex thoughts.
It's mind-boggling to think that something as intangible as consciousness arises from these tiny electrical impulses.
It really is. And what's fascinating is that neuroscience is constantly pushing the boundaries of what we know about these processes.
That's where the source material you sent comes in, right? It goes beyond just the basic definitions and delves into some really specific areas of neuroscience.
Exactly. It highlights 4 key subfields that really showcase the breadth and depth of this field.
Oh, cool. So like different lenses through which we can view the brain and nervous system.
Exactly. The first one they explore is cognitive neuroscience, which focuses on those higher level brain functions.
Okay, so cognitive neuroscience is tackling things like memory, attention, language. Those are some pretty big topics.
They are. And cognitive neuroscientists are making some incredible discoveries about how these functions work at the neural level.
So it's not just about defining what these functions are, but actually understanding how they happen in the brain.
Right. For example, there's fascinating research coming out about how memories are formed and retrieved. It's not just a simple storage system.
Like files on a computer.
It's much more dynamic than that. Emotions, context, sleep, all of these things can influence how memories are encoded and retrieved.
So our memories are constantly being shaped and reshaped.
Exactly. It's a fascinating area of research, and it has implications for everything from treating memory disorders to understanding how eyewitness testimony can be unreliable.
Wow, that's incredible. So cognitive neuroscience is giving us a whole new perspective on how our minds work. What about the other subfields? What's next on the list?
Well, the source material then moves on to developmental neuroscience, which takes a more lifespan approach to studying the brain.
Okay, so instead of just looking at the adult brain, developmental neuroscience is tracking how the brain changes throughout our lives.
Precisely. From before birth all the way to old age, developmental neuroscientists are studying how our brains grow, adapt, and unfortunately, sometimes decline.
So it's not like we're born with a fully formed brain and that's it.
Not at all. The brain is constantly evolving, and experiences play a huge role in shaping that development.
That makes me think about the whole nature versus nurture debate. How much of who we are is determined by our genes, and how much is shaped by our environment and experiences?
That's a question developmental neuroscientists are constantly grappling with. It seems like the answer is a complex interplay of both. For example, we know that genetics can predispose us to certain traits or conditions, but environment and experiences can influence how those genes are expressed.
So it's like our genes provide the blueprint, but our experiences determine how that blueprint is actually built.
Exactly. It's a fascinating field that helps us understand how we learn, adapt, and age. Okay, so we've got cognitive neuroscience, which is all about how the brain works, and developmental neuroscience, which tracks how the brain changes over time. What's the next stop on our neuroscience tour?
Well, this one might be a little heavier. The source material then delves into the neurobiology of disease.
Okay, so now we're getting into the realm of brain disorders.
Right. This subfield focuses on understanding the biological basis of neurological and psychiatric disorders. We're talking about conditions like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, depression, schizophrenia.
Those are some serious conditions. And neurobiology of disease is trying to get at the root causes of these disorders in the brain itself.
Exactly. By unraveling the intricate mechanisms that go awry in these disorders, researchers are hoping to develop more effective treatments and even preventative measures.
So instead of just treating the symptoms, they're trying to target the underlying problems in the brain.
Precisely. It's a challenging field, but it holds immense promise for improving the lives of millions of people. Absolutely. It's amazing to think that by studying the brain, we might be able to find cures for some of these devastating diseases. Okay, so we've covered cognitive, developmental, and the neurobiology of disease. What's the fourth and final area covered in the source material?
Last but not least, we have behavioral neuroscience, which is all about the connection between our brains and our behavior.
Okay, so this is linking what's happening in the brain to what we're actually doing out in the world.
Precisely. Researchers in this field are exploring things like how the brain processes rewards, how it regulates emotions, and even the neural basis of social behavior.
So it's like trying to understand how our brains drive our actions, our feelings, our interactions with others.
Exactly. It's a fascinating field that's shedding light on some of the most fundamental aspects of human nature.
I've always wondered how much of our personality and behavior is hardwired versus learned. I guess that's something behavioral neuroscience is trying to figure out.
It certainly is. And the findings have implications for everything from understanding addiction to developing more effective therapies for mental health disorders.
That's incredible. So we've got these four amazing subfields: cognitive, developmental, neurobiology of disease, and behavioral. It's like we're getting a 360-degree view of the brain and nervous system.
It's really a testament to how far neuroscience has come as a field.
But it's one thing to talk about these different areas, it's another to actually study the brain. It's not like you can just crack it open and take a look around.
Right. It's not exactly the most accessible organ,
Yeah.
but luckily we have some incredible tools and technologies that are allowing us to study the brain in ways that were unimaginable just a few decades ago.
Oh, like what? The source material mentions some pretty cool stuff.
Well, for starters, we have brain imaging techniques like fMRI and PT scans, which allow us to see the brain in action.
Wait, you can actually see the brain working?
In a way, yes. fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, measures changes in blood flow in the brain, which is a proxy for neural activity.
So if someone's thinking really hard about something, you can see which parts of their brain are lighting up.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for understanding how different brain regions are involved in various tasks.
Wow. And what about PT scans? How do those work?
PTANs, or positron emission tomography, use radioactive tracers to measure things like glucose metabolism in the brain. This gives us a different kind of information about brain activity.
So fMRI shows us where the action is happening, and PT scans tell us how much energy the brain is using in those areas.
You got it. And these are just two examples. We also have incredibly powerful microscopes that allow us to visualize individual brain cells and even the tiny connections between them.
It's amazing to think that we can zoom in on the brain with that level of detail. It's like exploring a whole new universe inside our heads. But with all this data coming from brain scans and microscopes, it must be a challenge to make sense of it all.
You're absolutely right. That's where computational power comes in. Neuroscience is increasingly relying on sophisticated computer programs and algorithms to analyze this vast amount of data.
So computers are becoming essential tools for understanding the brain. It sounds like neuroscience is at the forefront of both biology and technology.
It definitely is. And this convergence of disciplines is leading to some really exciting applications of neuroscience in the real world. For example, in medicine, we're seeing groundbreaking treatments for neurological disorders.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. How is all this neuroscience knowledge actually being used to improve people's lives?
Well, one example is deep brain stimulation, which
Mhm.
involves implanting electrodes in the brain to regulate abnormal nerve activity.
So they're actually putting electrodes in the brain?
Yes, and it's been incredibly effective in treating conditions like Parkinson's disease. It's like using technology to rewire the brain's circuitry.
That's incredible. What other medical applications are there?
Another exciting area is brain-computer interfaces, which can help people with paralysis control prosthetic limbs or even communicate using their thoughts.
Wow, so neuroscience is giving people back their mobility and their voice. That's truly revolutionary. But it's not just about treating diseases, right? What about other areas?
You're right. Neuroscience is also informing our understanding of education. By studying how the brain learns, we can develop teaching methods that are more aligned with the way our brains naturally process information.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach to education, we could tailor teaching methods to individual brains. That could be a game changer for how we learn.
Exactly. And the applications don't stop there. Neuroscience is also playing a key role in the development of artificial intelligence.
Really? How so?
By studying how the brain's neural networks process information, we can build more efficient and intelligent AI systems. It's like taking inspiration from nature's most powerful computer to create even more powerful machines.
I can see how understanding the brain could lead to some major breakthroughs in AI. It's like we're on the cusp of a whole new technological era driven by our understanding of the brain.
It certainly feels that way. And, with all this progress in neuroscience, it's important to acknowledge that there are still so many mysteries to unravel. We're just scratching the surface of what this incredible organ is capable of.
That's a good point. It's both exciting and humbling to think about how much we still don't know about the brain, but that's what makes this field so captivating.
Absolutely. And speaking of captivating, we've only just begun to explore the future of neuroscience. There are some truly mind-boggling advancements on the horizon.
Well, I can't wait to hear about those. We'll delve into the future of neuroscience in part 2 of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, because things are about to get really interesting. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but all this talk about the brain has me feeling like I need to go meditate or something, just to process it all.
I know, right? A lot to take in. But before we get too lost in our own neural networks, we were just about to dive into the future of neuroscience.
Oh, yeah. And believe me, the future is looking pretty wild.
Well, don't hold out on me. What kind of mind-blowing stuff are we talking about?
Well, the source material you provided touches on some really cutting-edge fields, and one that caught my eye is neurogenetics.
Neurogenetics. Ooh, that sounds intense.
It is. It's basically where brain science meets genetics.
Okay, so we're talking about how our genes, our DNA, influence the way our brains develop and function.
Exactly. It's about understanding how those tiny little genes can have a huge impact on everything from brain structure to our susceptibility to certain disorders.
So, like, are we talking about being able to predict if someone's at risk for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's just by looking at their genes?
That's the kind of thing they're working on. It's still early days, but the potential is there for early diagnosis and personalized treatments.
That would be huge. Early intervention could really make a difference for those conditions. It seems like neurogenetics is opening up a whole new world of possibilities for brain health.
It definitely is. But hey, hold on to your hats, because there's another field that's equally exciting and maybe a little bit intimidating.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready for anything.
Neuroinformatics.
Neuro what now? I've got to be honest, I'm not familiar with that one.
Think of it this way. Neuroscience research generates a ton of data, like mountains of data, from brain scans to genetic analyses to behavioral studies. It's a data deluge.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Lots of data, but what do you do with all of it?
That's where neuroinformatics comes in. It's about using powerful computers and clever algorithms to make sense of all that data. It's like trying to decipher the brain's code, but with massive data sets.
So it's like using big data to understand the brain, like creating a giant brain database that scientists can use to find patterns and make new discoveries.
You got it. Neuroinformatics is all about organizing, analyzing, and sharing brain data to accelerate research and, hopefully, lead to breakthroughs.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. It's like having a Google Maps for the brain, right? Helping us navigate all the complexities and find our way around.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, it's not just about analyzing data that already exists. Neuroinformatics is also driving the development of new tools and technologies for collecting and sharing data.
So it's like a continuous cycle of discovery and innovation.
Exactly. It's a really exciting field to watch. But, it's one thing to have all this knowledge about the brain. It's another to actually APPY it, to use it to develop new treatments and therapies.
Right, that's what I keep coming back to. How is all this amazing science actually making a difference in people's lives?
Well, that's where neuroengineering comes in. It's like taking all the knowledge from neurogenetics, neuroinformatics, and all the other fields and actually using it to design and create new technology.
Oh, now we're talking. What kind of technologies? Give me some examples.
Well, we already touched on deep brain stimulation and brain-computer interfaces. Those are just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What else is on the horizon?
Think about prosthetic limbs that can be controlled with thought, or implants that can help restore lost vision or hearing. We're talking about a future where technology can seamlessly interface with the human brain.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. It's amazing, and maybe a little bit scary, too.
I know, right? It's a lot to wrap our heads around. But the potential benefits are enormous. Imagine being able to help people with paralysis regain their mobility, or give people with blindness the gift of sight.
It's mind-blowing. But I imagine there's some ethical concerns to consider as well.
Absolutely. Anytime you're dealing with technology that can interact with the brain, you have to tread carefully. But for now, let's stay focused on the positive. The source material talks about some incredible projects that are really pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
Okay, tell me more about these projects.
Well, one that stands out is the Human Brain Project. It's this massive international effort to create a detailed simulation of the entire human brain.
A simulation of the entire brain. Wow, that's ambitious.
It is. The goal is to create a virtual brain, basically, that researchers can use to study how the brain works at every level, from individual neurons to complex networks.
It's like having a digital twin of the brain. What would be the benefit of something like that?
Well, for starters, it could help us understand how brain diseases develop and progress. We could test out new treatments and therapies in a virtual environment without having to experiment on real people.
Oh, wow. So it's like having a giant virtual laboratory for brain research. That's pretty amazing.
It is. And it could also help us understand how the brain gives rise to consciousness, which is one of the biggest mysteries in neuroscience.
Okay, I'm officially blown away. What else is out there?
Well, another project that's making waves is the Brain Initiative. This one is focused on mapping the activity of every single neuron in the human brain.
Every single neuron, but there are billions of them.
I know, right? It's a monumental task.
Right.
But they're developing some incredible technologies to make it happen.
So they're literally trying to map out the entire brain, neuron by neuron. It's like creating the ultimate brain atlas.
Exactly. And with that kind of detailed map, we could learn so much about how the brain works, both in health and disease.
It's clear that these projects are pushing the limits of both science and technology. It's amazing to think about what we might be able to achieve if they succeed.
The possibilities are endless. But, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's something we need to keep in mind as we delve deeper into the complexities of the brain.
Oh, I definitely see where you're going with this. We've been talking about all the amazing possibilities, but I imagine there are some ethical considerations to grapple with as well.
You're absolutely right. And that's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready to tackle the ethical side of things. Let's do it. All right, so we've journeyed through the ins and outs of the brain, the nervous system, and even glimpsed into the future of neuroscience. But like you said, with all this incredible potential, we've got to talk about the ethical side of things, right?
Absolutely. The ethical considerations are just as important as the scientific advancements themselves.
For sure. And the source material actually dives into some pretty thought-provoking ethical dilemmas.
It really does. And one that comes up right away is privacy in neuroimaging.
Right. We were talking about fMRI and how it allows us to see brain activity, but that brings up a whole bunch of questions about who has access to that information and how it's used.
Exactly. I mean, imagine if employers could scan your brain during a job interview, or if insurance companies could use your brain scans to determine your premiums.
Whoa, that's pretty intense. It's like, where does the line between scientific progress and personal privacy get drawn?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one that we as a society need to answer. We need to make sure that as this technology advances, we have clear guidelines and regulations in place to protect people's privacy.
I couldn't agree more. It's like, just because we can do something doesn't always mean we should, right?
Exactly. The source material highlights another ethical dilemma: the development of cognitive enhancers.
Oh, yeah. The idea of a pill that could make you smarter or more focused. That sounds pretty tempting, but also a little bit unsettling.
It is. I mean, think about it. If we could enhance our cognitive abilities, would it create an even bigger gap between those who have access to these enhancements and those who don't?
Right. Would it become like a prerequisite for success? Like you wouldn't even be considered for a job unless you were cognitively enhanced.
That's a very real concern, and one that we need to consider carefully.
It's kind of like those sci-fi movies where society is divided into the enhanced and the unenhanced, and it never seems to end well.
Yeah, not exactly a future I'm looking forward to. And then there's the even trickier issue of manipulating brain activity.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. As we understand more about how the brain works, it opens up the possibility of directly influencing people's thoughts, emotions, or even behaviors.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the implications if someone could control your thoughts or make you do something against your will.
It's like mind control. It definitely brings up a lot of questions about free will and what it truly means to be human.
It does. And it's something we need to be extremely cautious about.
This has been an incredible deep dive, but I think it's clear that the future of neuroscience isn't all sunshine and roses. There are some serious ethical challenges that we as a society need to address head on.
Absolutely. It's not just about the scientific advancements. It's about making sure that those advancements are used ethically and responsibly.
And I think that's what makes these conversations so important.
For sure. By talking about these issues, we can raise awareness and hopefully influence how these technologies are developed and used in the future.
This has been incredibly thought-provoking. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the amazing and sometimes slightly terrifying world of neuroscience.
My pleasure. It's been a fascinating conversation. And hey, who knows what incredible discoveries and ethical challenges await us in the future?
Only time will tell. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the brain and the future of neuroscience.
Until next time.